The bulldozer engine roared to life just as I was ripping up the moldy carpet in the living room. I paused, hammer in hand, and glanced out the shattered front window. That's when I saw her, Francesca Stapleton, head of the Oak Hollow HOA, standing with her arms crossed like she was posing for a mugshot and proud of it. Behind her were two guys in yellow vests, pointing at my house like it was some abandoned shack. Except it wasn't abandoned. I'd bought it 2 weeks ago, paid cash, had the deed, and I was inside. Working, I stormed out the front door, boots crunching over broken tile and gravel. "Hey, what the hell do you think you're doing?" Francesca turned like she'd been expecting me. "Mr. Thorne Ambers," she said, her voice sticky sweet and fake enough to rot teeth. "This property has been condemned by the HOA. It's unsafe. We're proceeding with demolition." "Condemned by who?" I asked, waving the hammer. "I just bought this place legally. Permits are filed." "You can't just knock it down." She pursed her lips like she'd bitten into a lemon. "The HOA board voted unanimously last month to condemn this structure. It's an eyesore and our community standards are very clear. I'm inside it," I barked. "You were about to bulldoze a house with someone in it." The yellow-vested guys exchanged a glance. "Ma'am," one of them said to Francesca, "we didn't know someone was inside. That's not safe. We can't." "You'll proceed," she snapped. "He's trespassing." I stepped off the porch, pulling a folded document from my back pocket. "Not trespassing. Here's the deed. County records, not HOA property. You don't own this land, and you sure as hell don't get to decide what's condemned." She snatched the paper from my hand, eyes scanning it, her mouth twisted. This can't be right." "It is. You just tried to destroy private property. And if that bulldozer had moved 1 foot closer, you'd be looking at attempted murder." The workers backed off. One of them muttered, "We're out, not getting sued over this." Francesca's face flushed deep red. "Oak Hollow does not tolerate slums." "Good news," I said. "I'm not building one. I'm rebuilding this place. Legally. And if you or your HOA goons step foot on my property again, I'll have you arrested for trespassing." She looked like she wanted to argue, but instead turned and stormed off down the street, heels stabbing at the pavement like she was trying to kill it. I watched her go, heart still pounding. I'd heard about nightmare HOAs, but this was something else. I knew then, this wasn't over. Not by a long shot, especially not with someone like Francesca Stapleton calling the shots. HOA story, HOS stories, Homeowners Association stories. 2 mornings later, I was ankle-deep in drywall rubble, pulling ancient nails from the studs when I heard the unmistakable whine of a drone outside. I walked to the front window, stripped of glass since the day I arrived, and spotted it hovering above the corner of my property. Sleek, black, and marked with a little Oak Hollow logo on the side. I didn't wave or shout this time. I just walked calmly to the garage, grabbed my aluminum rake, and swung it like a baseball bat. The drone cracked midair and spiraled down into the overgrown bushes near the fence line. A minute later, someone banged on the gate hard enough to rattle the chain link. I didn't rush. I let the silence get heavy before I finally opened it. "Thorne Ambers," said the man on the other side, puffed up like he was trying to fill out his ill-fitting blazer. "I'm Harold Bixby, HOA compliance officer. You just destroyed community surveillance property." "You mean a drone that was trespassing on private land," I said, stepping outside. "You want to explain why you're flying surveillance over my backyard?" He tried to look official, but the sweat on his upper lip betrayed him. "We received reports of unauthorized construction. We have a right to document infractions." "No, you don't," I said, lifting my phone. "And I've got county permits for every nail I've hammered." "You want a copy?" He hesitated, scanning the yard like he might find some code violation growing out of the crabgrass. "You filmed the inside of a private residence without consent. That's illegal," I added. "Hope the footage was worth it." He adjusted his collar. "We'll be filing a formal notice of violation. You're not allowed to remove exterior fixtures without HOA approval." "Fixtures? You mean the rotten shutters I took off yesterday? Those things had wasp nests bigger than your ego, he bristled, but I turned and walked back toward the garage. Next time you fly a drone over here, I called over my shoulder, make sure it's registered. Otherwise, I'll report it to the FAA. I didn't hear him leave. I didn't care. By the end of that week, I'd installed 2 motion-activated cameras on both corners of the house and another one facing the street. I didn't post signs. I wanted them to keep coming, and they did. 2 nights later, someone dumped a stack of fake HOA citations on my doorstep. No envelope. No return address. Just a pile of red paper with made-up violations like unapproved color palette and failure to maintain community harmony. One even accused me of excessive tool usage after sunset. The next morning, I drove straight to the county clerk's office, carrying a binder of every document I'd filed since buying the property. I waited in line behind a woman arguing over a lost dog license until I got to the counter. I need to speak to someone about HOA overreach, I told the clerk. They tried to demolish my house, flew a drone into my yard, and now they're issuing fake citations. She glanced at the paperwork and frowned. You're not inside the HOA jurisdiction. This parcel is grandfathered. They've got no legal authority over you. I know that. They don't seem to care. She tapped her keyboard, then handed me a list of county attorneys specializing in property rights. Talk to one of these. If they keep pushing, file a restraining order. And report the drone incident to the sheriff. By noon, I was sitting across from a real estate attorney named Victor Ayers. He wore a charcoal suit 2 decades out of style and had a war general's patience. After flipping through my binder, he nodded slowly. They're trying to force you out, he said. If they can make the property uninhabitable, they assume you'll sell under pressure. They've already tried bulldozing it. That's criminal trespass, potentially reckless endangerment. Did you file a report? I called the sheriff. They said without damage or injury, it's a civil issue. I'll escalate it. You said they voted to condemn the house, according to Francesca Stapleton. Victor's eyebrows lifted. Stapleton, I've dealt with her before. She plays fast and loose, but she's not untouchable. He drafted a cease and desist letter on the spot, citing county records proving the property was never under HOA control. He added language about harassment, surveillance, and defamation. Then he filed a formal complaint with the county board, requesting an investigation into Oak Hollow's governance practices. Start documenting everything, he said. Times, dates, faces, words. If they so much as lean over your fence to sneeze, write it down. That night, I installed a second lock on the garage and started keeping a journal. I also began asking around the neighborhood. Quietly, in passing, turns out I wasn't the only one who'd tangled with Francesca, Mrs. Lyman, 2 doors down, told me her grandkids weren't allowed to leave sidewalk chalk drawings on her driveway without getting fined. A retired plumber named Felix said the HOA made him repaint his front door 3 times in 1 year because the shade of navy was inconsistent. Another neighbor, a nurse named Cameron, said they fined her for unsanitary decor after she left her scrubs drying on a clothesline. Each story was more ridiculous than the last. I started recording them with permission. I told everyone the truth that I was collecting evidence. Not to sue them, but to expose the board. When I mentioned Francesca's attempt at demolition, Cameron's eyes widened. She did that to the Gladwells, she said. Old couple on Birch Avenue, they went on vacation, came home, and half their porch was gone. She claimed it violated setback rules. Turns out it was legal, but she scared them into selling. How many houses has she done this to? 4, maybe 5. Always ones that needed work. She doesn't want ugly homes lowering her property value. I thanked her and added that to the growing file. By the end of the second week, I had over a dozen testimonies, printed maps showing the actual HOA boundary, and a notarized statement from the county confirming my property was excluded from their jurisdiction. So when the third drone showed up, this one smaller, quieter, but still marked with that Oak Hollow logo. I didn't knock it down. I followed it. It hovered for a few minutes, then zipped off toward the cul-de-sac across from mine. I grabbed my keys, slid into my truck, and drove slowly in the same direction. The drone landed in the backyard of a 2-story tan house with fake columns. I parked a block away, pulled out a pair of binoculars, and waited. 10 minutes later, Francesca herself emerged onto the patio, picked up the drone, and disappeared back inside. I took a photo of the address, wrote it down, and sent it to Victor. He called me 5 minutes later. She's operating surveillance equipment from private property. That's a felony without consent from the people being recorded. I've just looped in the sheriff's office. They're opening an investigation. I stared at the photo on my phone. It was grainy but clear enough. I want her off the board, I said. If these charges stick, Victor said, she won't just be off the board, she'll be in front of a judge. And for the first time since I'd stepped inside that crumbling house, I felt like I wasn't fighting alone. 2 days after I sent Victor the drone photo, things escalated in a way I hadn't expected, not louder but quieter. Eerily so. No more fake violation notices, no drones, no surprise visitors with clipboards. On the surface, it looked like they'd finally backed off, but I didn't trust silence. Not from people like Francesca, so I kept working, but I also kept watching. Every morning before I swung a hammer, I walked the perimeter of the property. Every evening, I checked the camera feeds and logged anything out of place. On Friday morning, I found something. Fresh tire tracks cut across the back alley behind my fence. They hadn't been there the night before. I followed the marks to where they ended in a patch of dead ivy. Nestled in the brush was a waterproof case, no bigger than a shoebox. It was half buried, like someone had hurried to stash it. Inside was a motion sensor camera, battery powered, with a dirty lens facing directly toward my backyard. I didn't touch it. I took photos, then called Victor. He answered on the first ring. That's enough. We've got her on trespassing, illegal surveillance, and now this. I'm calling in Detective Rojas. She's been keeping an eye on the HOA since the Gladwell incident. You think she'll take it seriously? She will if I hand her a file that thick. By noon, Rojas was at my house in plain clothes, her badge clipped to her belt and her boots coated in red dust. She crouched next to the hidden camera with a practiced eye, then pulled on gloves and bagged the entire case. This was active, she said, holding it up. Battery's warm. Someone came back to check it recently. You didn't touch anything, just documented it. She nodded once. Good. I'll run the serial number, and if it's registered to anyone connected to the board, we'll have enough to get a warrant for her home. For the first time since she arrived, she looked directly at me. Her expression didn't change, but her voice dropped slightly. You're not the first they've tried to push out, but you're the first who came in prepared. I didn't say anything to that. Later that afternoon, Rojas called back. The camera's registered to a security firm in Bakersfield, she said. Guess who the primary account holder is? I already knew. Francesca. Francesca. She started the contract 6 months ago, and the payment method, a debit card linked to the Oak Hollow operating account. That's community money. She used HOA funds to buy surveillance gear for personal use. That was the break we needed. The following Monday, Rojas got her warrant. I didn't see the search myself, but I heard about it from Cameron. She said 3 unmarked cars pulled up to Francesca's house just after noon. They came out with boxes, hard drives, and 2 laptops. Francesca didn't say a word. Just stood in her doorway, arms folded, watching the officers walk through her life. By Thursday, the story hit the county news site. The headline was short, but it didn't pull punches. Oak Hollow HOA president under investigation for illegal surveillance and misuse of funds. Victor called me that evening. She's finished, he said. They froze the HOA's accounts. County Oversight Committee is stepping in. Emergency meeting's been scheduled for next week. Can I attend? Not only can you attend, you're on the agenda. They want a statement. I spent the weekend organizing everything. Photos, video clips, neighborhood testimonies. All of it arranged chronologically. with timestamps and cross-referenced with county property lines. I even included the map I'd found in the city archives showing that my house sat just outside the Oak Hollow boundary, a detail Francesca had either missed or deliberately ignored. The meeting was held at the community center on the edge of the neighborhood. It was packed, every seat taken. People stood in the back and lined the walls. The entire board was there, minus Francesca, who had been suspended pending investigation. The interim chair, a soft-spoken man named Dr. Mallory, opened the floor to public input. I was third on the list. I stepped up to the microphone and laid the binder on the table in front of the panel. "My name is Thorne Ambers," I said. "I bought the property at 1149 Maple Row 3 weeks ago. Since then, the HOA under Francesca's direction has attempted to demolish my house without cause or authority, conducted unauthorized surveillance on private land, and used association funds to finance it." Murmurs rippled through the room. "I've documented every incident," I continued. "I've also spoken with over a dozen residents who have experienced similar harassment, fines, and intimidation tactics. The evidence is in this binder, and the county has already confirmed that my property is not under Oak Hollow jurisdiction. It never was." One of the board members leaned forward. "Are you suggesting the HOA knowingly targeted non-member properties?" "Yes," I said. "And I believe they did it to manipulate property sales and keep undesirable homes out of sight." A woman near the front stood up. "He's right," she said. "Francesca bullied my mother into repainting her house twice in one season. She threatened to fine her for emotional disruption when she hung wind chimes." Another voice from the back. "I got a citation for having my recycling bin visible for more than 20 minutes. That was last spring. I paid it because I didn't know I could fight it." The meeting snowballed. Resident after resident spoke up, some waving their own stacks of paper, others just venting years of quiet frustration. No one defended Francesca, not once. The board voted unanimously to suspend all HOA enforcement activities until a full audit could be completed. They also issued a formal apology to the community and began accepting nominations for emergency board replacements. Victor and Rojas stayed behind with a few county officials to begin collecting the testimonies. I walked outside into the warm evening air, half expecting another drone to buzz by or a citation to be fluttering on my windshield. Instead, I found Cameron waiting near the curb. "You did it," she said. "You actually did it." "Not alone," I replied. "Took half the neighborhood." "Still," she said. "You turned the lights on. We've been in the dark for too long." A car pulled up across the street and paused. Inside, I recognized one of the former board members, Harold Bixby. He didn't get out, just watched for a moment, then drove off. I didn't wave. Over the next week, the cameras came down. Francesca's name was scrubbed from every official HOA document. The county released a statement confirming that she would be facing criminal charges for wiretapping, misuse of funds, and attempted destruction of private property. They also confirmed that Oak Hollow would be overseen by a third-party trustee until new leadership could be installed. I kept rebuilding the house, but now neighbors came by willingly, dropping off donuts, offering ladders, even helping swing a few hammers. The place started to take shape faster than I'd planned. One morning, as I installed new windows with Felix's help, he looked up from the frame and said, "You know, this place used to be a sore spot. People crossed the street to avoid walking past it. Now, it's the most talked about house in the neighborhood." "I didn't mean to make it famous," I said. He chuckled. "You didn't. Francesca did. You just refused to back down." The last thing I installed was a short iron sign near the front gate, not flashy, just one word, private. No logos, no citations, no fake notices, just a clear message, and this time no one dared to challenge it. The morning after the board's suspension, I stood in my kitchen, newly drywalled. With sunlight filtering through the window, I just caulked and reviewed the summary report Victor emailed me. It detailed the county's findings. A 2-decade trail of financial discrepancies, unauthorized surveillance purchases, and fraudulent citations issued under Francesca's tenure. The audit confirmed what the community already began to suspect: Oak Hollow's governing body hadn't just bent the rules. They'd shattered them, but what jumped out most was buried in the appendix. Under a section labeled Property Acquisition Patterns, Victor had highlighted a list of homes sold under duress over the past 5 years. 16 properties, all sold below market value. All to entities connected to a single LLC registered in Nevada. The registered agent's name, Nathan Stapleton, Francesca's cousin. I called Victor immediately. She rigged the board to force out homeowners so her family could scoop up the lots, I said. We suspected as much. But now we've got paperwork linking the HOA's citations and structural condemnations to coerced sales. That's racketeering. She was running a real estate racket under the HOA's name, which means it's no longer just county business. I've already forwarded this to the district attorney. That afternoon, Detective Rojas returned with 2 agents from the state attorney general's office. They didn't ask for permission this time. They had subpoenas. By sundown, they'd seized the HOA's remaining records, including board meeting transcripts, personal emails, and internal communications going back 10 years. The next day, Francesca was arrested outside a luxury hair salon in Westlake. She tried to claim mistaken identity, but didn't get past the sidewalk before she was handcuffed and placed in the back of an unmarked SUV. The footage ran that evening on the local news. No one in Oak Hollow seemed surprised. In the following weeks, the neighborhood changed. The new interim board, led by Dr. Mallory and 2 residents who'd never served before, hosted open forums twice weekly. They reviewed every citation issued in the last 5 years and voided 80% of them. Funds collected from fraudulent fines were returned. Families who'd been intimidated into selling were offered legal support to challenge the sales and reclaim their homes. I kept busy finishing the house. The master bath took longer than expected. The plumbing had been routed through a maze of mismatched pipes, but I figured it out. No one stopped by to measure my fence. No one left notices under my wipers. It was quiet, in a way that felt earned. One evening, after laying the final coat of sealant on the front steps, I visited the community center. Cameron was there, seated near the back, flipping through a manila folder. She waved me over. "They're talking about dissolving the HOA entirely," she said. "Seriously? New board members say the structure's too damaged to fix. No trust, no transparency. They want to replace it with a voluntary neighborhood association. No authority, just coordination." I nodded. "That might actually work. We're voting on it next week. You should come." I said I would. Outside the center, I ran into Rojas. She leaned against her car, arms crossed, watching the sky turn pink. "They're building something better here," she said. "Because of the board. Because of the people who stood up to it." She handed me a copy of the AG's formal charges against Francesca: mail fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy, illegal surveillance, and real estate coercion. Stapleton LLC was being dissolved and assets were frozen pending trial. "She's not getting out of this one," Rojas said. "She ever say why she did it?" She said she was protecting the neighborhood from decline, called it preservation through enforcement. Rojas shook her head. Funny how her definition of preservation always lined up with her investment portfolio. The trial began 6 weeks later. I testified on the second day. The prosecutor asked me to describe the moment I realized they were about to demolish my home. I told the court what I saw: a bulldozer idling in my driveway, a stack of forged condemnation papers, and a woman who didn't care whether I was inside the structure or not. She believed the rules didn't apply to her, I said. She wasn't enforcing codes. She was eliminating obstacles. The courtroom was packed with residents, many of whom had once stayed silent out of fear. Not anymore. Each testimony chipped away at the defense's claim that Francesca was simply overzealous. Her cousin, Nathan, tried to distance himself, but emails revealed he'd coached her on how to force sales without triggering lawsuits. It took the jury less than 3 hours to convict them both. Francesca was sentenced to 12 years in state prison with no chance of parole for at least 7. Nathan got 8. The state seized their properties and began negotiating restitution agreements with the families they'd displaced. Back in Oak Hollow, the vote to dissolve the HOA passed with near unanimity. The new volunteer committee formed with 3 simple rules: no fines, no surveillance, and no enforcement authority. They organized community cleanups, helped seniors with home repairs, and hosted monthly cookouts. No one talked about paint shades or mailbox heights. One Saturday, as I adjusted the new solar lights along my walkway, Felix walked up with a toolbox under one arm. "You ever finish the attic insulation?" he asked, last week. "Why?" He opened the box. "I've got some leftover foam panels, figured you might want 'em." I nodded. "You read my mind." Later that night, I stood on my front porch, the air thick with summer warmth and citronella from tiki torches someone had stuck along the curb. Kids rode scooters down the newly repaved street. Music drifted from Cameron's front yard, where a few neighbors had gathered for drinks and laughter. For the first time since I'd bought the place, nobody looked at my house like it was something to be removed. It wasn't a mark on the neighborhood anymore. It was part of it. One of the new committee members, a retired librarian named Nora, walked past with a clipboard and waved. "You coming to the movie night next Friday?" she asked. "What are we watching?" "Something about a guy rebuilding a town with a hammer and a grudge," I laughed. "I'll bring popcorn." She grinned and kept walking. Inside, I turned off the porch light and took one last look at the street. The shadows didn't feel threatening anymore. No more drones. No more bulldozers, no more battles over made-up rules, just neighbors. Living. And for the first time since I bought the house that almost got flattened with me still inside, I finally felt at home.